My name is Reverend Adam Taylor. I have the privilege of serving as the acting president of Sojourners, and I am pleased to welcome you to this companion training around voter protection. In this case, we are going to focus on how clergy can play a decisive role in protecting voters against intimidation and the threat of violence. Sojourners is pleased to and honored to have partnered with the Skinner Leadership Institute and the National African American Clergy Network to co-lead the Turnout Sunday Lawyers and Callers Initiative. You can learn more at turnoutsunday.com. There's been a surge of concern and alarm among many clergy and other faith leaders after the president's dangerous comments during the presidential debate, in which he not only refused to accept a peaceful transfer of power, but also told white supremacists to stand back and to stand by in this election. We know that there is a long and tortured history of violence and intimidation, and even more recently of voter suppression tactics directed at communities of color in particular. And we believe that it is a Imago Dei imperative for clergy and faith leaders to come alongside and protect every single voter, because they are made in God's very image and likeness. Protecting the vote is a nonpartisan imperative and cause, and it is one that is ingrained in our commitment as disciples and as people of faith. We know that there is so much at stake in this election, and it is critical that the faith community provides a moral presence at polling sites to help deter and to deflect efforts that are trying to intimidate and in some cases even act violently toward voters. Congressman John Lewis said it best: the right to vote is precious, almost sacred. It is the most powerful nonviolent tool or instrument in a democratic society. We must use it. Not only must we use it, but as clergy, we hope you will join us in volunteering at polling sites to provide a moral presence so that we can truly be peacemakers in this election. It is my privilege to now introduce Dr. Barbara Williams Skinner. She serves as the president of the Skinner Leadership Institute, and she'll be sharing more details about the critical role that clergy can play at polling sites.
The prophets and Jesus remind us of our faith-inspired call to protect and uplift the vulnerable in all that we do. Nothing calls forth that mandate than the need for faith leaders to show up at polling sites of vulnerable voters on election day to provide a moral covering and assist them where voter challenges may arise. This call is the essence of Turnout Sunday Lawyers and Callers, voter protection campaign co-hosted by the National African American Clergy Network and its partner Sojourner, plus other allies. In 9 states, 8 of them battleground states, dedicated local pastors and faith leaders are working hard in spite of racist voter suppression laws to an historic vote for the betterment of local citizens. Yet they are facing blatant and persistent attempts to suppress and outright steal the vote of vulnerable citizens from longer lines, voter facing broken equipment, and even intimidation that does not occur in the white community. That is why Turnout Sunday Lawyers and Callers is now recruiting a vast network of pastors and other clergy leaders, both veteran and young senior pastors in our 9 states to serve as volunteer poll chaplains. Those states are Alabama, Arizona, Florida, Georgia, Michigan, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. They will act as peacemakers to protect the precious blood-bought right to vote using the election protection training provided by the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights and backed by a clergy hotline and virtual state-specific command center. This is our call, and we accept it willingly. Thank you so much, and I am so grateful to be joined in this work by the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, represented by its Senior National Coordinator, Kena Jackson. Kena Jackson.
Thank you, Dr. Skinner. We're going to jump right into the presentation today. So let's get started. So we're going to present our election protection voter intimidation guidance for 2020. So quickly, we're going to discuss what voter intimidation is, what you can do, what it looks like, and what systems we've put into place to already support the work you'll be doing on election day and also be able to support voters as they go out to vote. So what is voter intimidation? First and foremost, it is illegal. It is illegal. So by federal law, it prohibits intimidation, threats, or coercing of a person for the purpose of interfering with their right to vote. Again, it is illegal to do this. In addition to federal law, every state separately prohibits the various levels of voter intimidation. So again, it's important for you to have relationships in the community. Again, attend one of our EP chaplain trainings hosted by TurnOut Sunday and Lawyers and Collars, and also report it. But we'll get into that as we move on in this presentation. So what does voter intimidation look like? A lot of it is obvious. So that's, of course, following voters around, standing behind them. Usually it's as simple as just invading someone else's personal space, but you'll be able to see that it's done in a very aggressive way. Some other examples of voter intimidation: suggesting possible future violence, prosecution, or legal action based on a voter's presence at the polls. Again, we know that there's going to be a high turnout of people of color. There's going to be a high turnout in communities of predominantly Spanish-speaking communities. So again, we've seen the calls from the president, and we want to make sure you guys are prepared and can face and confront these issues. So are guns allowed at the polls? Unfortunately, every state does not prohibit guns at the polls. We've heard the call for folks to go and monitor the polls. The only folks that should be at polls should be trained election protection volunteers, other nonpartisan groups, and other trained organizations that are working with election officials to make sure voters can gain access to the polls. So again, we want to make sure that you guys know what voter intimidation looks like and you're ready to address it. So what have we been doing? How have we been preparing for voter intimidation? So many of our EP chaplains are aware that we have relationships with our coalition partners and community groups on the ground to support this effort. So all of us in all of these states are working with larger coalitions that have reached out to election officials and election administrators in your states, that have already started having conversations with your elected officials and local law enforcement. Many of our EP chaplains we know have relationships with local law enforcement. So we're asking you to continue to engage, continue to ask those questions needed to be able to protect voters on election day. Ask if there is a plan, and whatever you do, share that information. It's important to make sure that voters, your constituencies, are aware of the plans in place to protect them as they go to the polls. And last but not least, what do you do when you see voter intimidation? Document it. Documentation is crucial. Take down as much information as you can when you see these acts occurring at the polls. Write down everything. Describe what folks are wearing. Describe what kind of car they're driving. And again, make sure you're getting a full description of their activities and be specific. Secondly, we want you to report it. It's important for us to get as much information as we can to our coalition partners on the ground. And again, we relay that information to election administrators and officials that are working to make sure you gain access to the polls. So again, call 833-4-TURNOUT, 833-487-6688 if you see voter intimidation at the polls. And lastly, notify an election manager, an election official, a poll manager at the polls. Let them know exactly what you're seeing, and be direct. Again, voter intimidation is illegal. And we want to make sure that they're doing everything they can to protect voters' right to vote. But what we don't want you to do is we don't want you to put yourself in harm's way. So again, make sure if you see violence, if you see, if you feel that you need to protect yourself, call 911. Also, don't publicize any of these issues on social media. We don't want voters to get scared to vote when an issue can easily be resolved quickly. So again, we're asking that you report everything that you see to 8334 TurnOut. That is your friend. That is your #1 tool. And again, don't put yourself in harm's way. So now I'm going to turn it over to Reverend Jim Wallace, the founder of Sojourners.
Jesus said in his Beatitudes, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God." So we're called to be peacemakers. Lots of peace lovers out there, but we're called to be peacemakers. So I want to say to all you clergy, you're already trained. You do this, you know this. You've done this for a long time. We know how to watch, how to listen, how to be present, how to pay attention to what people are doing and feeling and saying. And we are the ones who can be peacemakers in a situation that is even full of conflict. I've been greatly filled with hope by seeing all of the voters standing in line for early voting, despite voter intimidation, despite threats of voter suppression, maybe because of those threats. They're in line, they're standing, and they're waiting, and they're going to vote. And so we as clergy are going to come to show up, to stand with them, be alongside them, and to make sure that we are there to be peaceful, to be a presence, to take a breath, and have everyone just understand how sacred this moment is. So this is a way to be a part of hope, that people vote and they're protected and they reclaim their rights. So just remember, you're already trained. You've done this. You know how to do this. So don't be intimidated yourselves. Come and be who you are at these polling places. Because blessed are the peacemakers, and they're the ones who get to be called the very children of God.